Okay, rules clinic, Frank Fuel, and then if Mark needs to, Mark, if you need Mark to chime in with you, he's here as well.
We got all 95 slides teed up and should be through this with no questions in about 58 minutes or so.
He's joking.
You meant 58 seconds.
Potato, potato. Next slide. Next one. Luckily, we have a lot of other things by the chat that we are going to be concerned with, at least when we start. Rules and rule changes really are not that big of a concern. However, there are 3 rule changes that we do need to be aware of, and then some editorial changes. The first one here, I'll let everybody read it, and then I'll explain it. Many officials were already doing this. Now it's formalized. So basically, when replacing a disqualified or injured player, let me minimize this, or when a player is directed to leave the game, and a signal again at the end of the interval. Basically, I think the next slide, if it gives it, once you notify the coach, and this becomes a big issue when a player is disqualified for whatever reason, the timer will sound 2 signals related to the 15-second maximum interval permitted for replacing a disqualified or injured player. You will notify the timer after you've notified the coach. They will sound the horn. Once the 15 seconds is up, the second signal will be sounded at the end of that replacement interval. Okay? If you go into your case book, there's a case play in there, and people will say, the question comes up, well, can I give a warning because delay a game warning on the coach? There's a case play that's put in there this year reflective of this rule, and it does not give you that allowance. I'm just telling you what the book says, that if the coach has not replaced the player at the end of the 15 seconds when the second signal is given, then it is a technical foul towards the head coach. That's in the case. That's what the intent is. Let's move on to this next one. Next slide, please. Here's the exception. I'll let everybody read it. If it is an injured player and they burn a timeout, then that player will remain in that 15 seconds does not come into play. Next slide. And as I explained, here's the intent. Next slide. The highlighted part was added, and this is for forfeiture, protest, interruption of a game. A coach is removed from the premises for unsporting conduct and no authorized school personnel is present to assume responsibility of the team. If that is the case, then the game is declared a forfeit. I don't foresee this being a problem at some of the larger schools where they have the head coach, assistant, and assistant. But at some of the other locations where there is only one coach, and that coach is removed from the premises for unsporting conduct, and there's no other authorized school personnel available to be on the bench, then the game is forfeited. Next slide. And I saw a question pop up, and we'll get back to it about the earlier one. And here's the discussion. Next slide. And this is the third one, which added the word or changed the word may be warned, as opposed to an automatic. Head coach may be warned unless the offense is judged to be a major, in which case technical foul may be ruled. And I believe that's out of yes 10-6. Next slide. The second bullet there states why they changed it. The previous language indicated the official must warn the head coach. Now they just clarified it that if the act is so grievous, you do not require to give a warning prior to issuing an unsporting technical. Next slide. Those are the three rule changes. The next one is an editorial change, and I think Mark and a couple of us had discussions and clarified some things, and now it's a little bit more clear, but we had this discussion over the summer about the exception on when to administer technical fouls that are at the end of the quarter or extra period. And I'll let everybody read this. Yes, Shane, I'm in quarantine. This is all the clothes I got left. So basically, next slide. I think it gives the example. If a technical foul occurs after the ball becomes dead to end a quarter or extra period, the next quarter or extra period is started by administering the free throws. If the fourth quarter or extra period ends and the score is tied, the free throws will start the extra period. Next slide. If the exception, if the score is not tied and the result of the free throws would tie or win the game, the free throws are administered as part of the preceding quarter or period. If the result of the game is not an issue, no free throws need to be shot. So in this picture here, technical foul given after the end of the fourth period, the home team is ahead, and I'm going to take it that the home team had a technical foul called on them. The visitors would shoot the free throw. Next slide. That clarified what I went back to the previous rule book and it wasn't as clear. So they clarified it and then they put the exception in there. The next area is if you look in the book, they list the points of emphasis for this year. And in this slide deck, which is available on the National High School Federation webpage and other comments, you can go through and you can look, but the points of emphasis are this just about every year. I think this year they took out traveling. So they talk about block charge. We talked about block charge over the summer extensively, those of you that dialed in. So they have block charge. Next slide. Next slide. We could negotiate and talk about block charge a lot. They outline what the rule is. And what I recommend is that we make sure we are in, from a mechanic standpoint, the best position. And we've talked about it during pregame to see the whole play. Next slide. And all this is just right out of the definition from the book. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. So as you see through this, it talks about the time and distance, when and they are not. Next slide. Next slide. They put the use of proper signals and reporting area, which is something that's new as far as a point of emphasis. What I will caution, especially the newer officials, this slide is from the National Federation. Here in the state of Texas, we do have an exception for the reporting area. So make sure you look on our website and or Arbiter to have an understanding. But at the same time, if you're transit, a military guy or something like that, and you're just learning basketball and you are not going to stay in the state of Texas for the next 30, 40 years, it does not hurt to learn the proper reporting area for Federation as you move to other states that may not have an exception. Next slide. Good communication, proper use of signals and mechanics is part of that communication. Next slide. What this pic here on the left-hand side is trying to indicate, because I went through the book and I could not find that count or start clock signal, is some folks have a tendency to have the arm up on their count, and then when the ball is touching and they want to chop it in, instead of chopping it all the way in, they just kind of grab some air with a fist like they do at other levels. So recommend as we get close to the season that we go back to the back of the book, both the mechanics book and the rule book, and take a look at, I believe it's pictures 1 through 30 something, 1 through 48, and take a look at the mechanics and make sure we're doing that. Especially us veteran officials that are working with some of the newer guys, making sure we're teaching them the right way. Next slide. For some of this is refresher. For others, it may be new. Either way, at the national level, they want us all to refresh. Next slide. Next slide. This is right out of the mechanics book. The 4 things that you do when you observe and blow your whistle. Next slide. Next slide. We are still talking on proper signals and reporting area. Currently, we're talking about proper signals. And we're talking about the proper signals and then getting to the reporting area after a foul has been committed. Next slide.
Just real quick, Frank.
Yes.
Maria, we will be posting this meeting online, so you'll be able to see, because all the slides are important.
And I apologize, I did not want to read every slide to everyone for the sake of time, since it is kind of refresh. And then this last one talks about complete descriptions of all two-person and three-person mechanics are in the National Federation High School Basketball Officials Manual. Next slide. Okay, here's the reporting area as it is outlined in the Federation book. However, here in Texas, we do have an exception to that. I believe the exception talks about clearing players, clearing the three-point line and the free throw line extended, and you do not, or you're not required to come to a stop. So you can walk and signal or walk and talk as long as you make eye contact with the scorer. That is different than when you read your high school mechanics book, because this picture is right out of the book. Next slide. Again, the referral to the officials manual. Next slide. Points of efforts, court coverage. Next slide.
Hey, Frank, before you go
Yes, sir.
further, would you speak? Can you go back that slide?
Go back.
And I know
Go ahead.
I had some questions over the last couple of weeks, but we talked a little bit about dual coverage areas or 2 whistles or 3 whistles. Can you talk a little bit about when it's good to have a double whistle, triple whistle, when it, what are they talking about when about getting plays right? Can you talk a little bit about what the work we did over the summer?
Yeah. And Kenny, there's some people that may have cringed when they heard triple whistle, and there may be, and there are situations that may be, and that's okay. When you look at the diagram here, and I'll primarily stay to the right of the diagram, you see some overlapping areas, or not overlapping, but I'll call them intersecting areas of responsibility based upon where the official is at the time, or the officials are at the time. So based upon where the ball is, where the officials are, and where your primary is, and where your secondary coverage is, and I'll use there in the lane where if everybody has color, where the yellow and the blue intersect there down the middle. There are those type of areas, depending upon the situation, that you could have a double whistle based upon where someone's matchup is, based upon where the ball is or where the ball is going. So those are those types of situations where you may have a double whistle. Now, what you want to do during pregame, and this may be a little bit more Kenny than you wanted, but we did talk a lot about on discussing those situations, the double whistles or even the triples during pregame, so everybody has an understanding of whose primary it is, whose responsibility is to take it to the table, but also to not have 2 signals given by 2 different officials and 2 different signals during that time period. So that's the type of things that you want to pregame, and it may be a little bit more of a challenge this season as we get started. But as you see those areas that overlap or intersect rather, you want to make sure that you talk about those and have an understanding of, yes, you may have had to whistle, but that may not have been your primary. You may have had a secondary whistle, and have an understanding of how the system is to work and how you as a crew are going to work. Is that kind of where you were going, Kenny? And if not, then I'll refer to Mark.
Yeah. Also, just to talk about, so we have plays where where things are obvious, and just because it's not in our area, a lot
Then
of
we got to go get.
Yeah. So we should think about making sure that the plays are obvious, right? Illegal. It's not something that person would pass on. So those are the kind of things that we've been working on to make sure that we get the calls right. So we don't want to pick up, travels from the sea in this picture here to the right of the lead. right? We don't want to pick up that travel. But but if we have plays that kind of, that the lead was looking somewhere else, and that person comes to the hash mark closest to his side, he may not have picked up that call. So if we see that call, it's okay to get those calls, and our egos need to be okay with helping each other, but we got to make sure that we get the obvious illegal and things that are just non-basketball. We have to get those as a crew. And I think George saying right. Don't be afraid to come together as well.
Non-basketball plays and calls that are good for the game.
Yeah, Mark is someone who's been leading a lot of our trainings as well. Is there anything you want to add there?
No, they touched on it. The things that we've been talking about is changing the culture. Obviously, getting plays right. The game comes first, right? So the order we've always talked about is game comes first, crew comes second, yourself comes last individually. But I agree with everything that Frank and Kenny said, right? We want to get plays right. But if it's illegal, obvious, and it's good for the game and fits the game, those we want to get. Definitely want to pregame them, talk about them. And then obviously, to Frank's point, just have cadence on those whistles. Just respect other referees' primaries, but it's okay to come get them in a secondary cadence. And again, the biggest point is just we're trying to get plays right on the floor. That's kind of the culture shift we've been talking about on the Zoom meetings. So
that kind of leads into Art Barboza made a comment of, it seems that the focus has changed on getting the calls right, regardless of who it comes from. Is that correct? Is that what we're looking at?
I'll agree with Art, but I think as basketball officials, we should have always been that way. I think Mark talked about it, maybe a little bit of a culture shift, and that's not that the game has changed, but as individuals, we may have to change the culture. So I agree with Art, but I at the same time, I think that we've, as officials and as a crew, we want to go out, and most of us have, that we always want to get it right. And as Mark said, the game, the crew, and then the individual in that order as far as what you want to take care of. Anything else?
Good.
Palming and carrying. Again, with the exception of some of the pictures that will be in here, I think one or two, everything is right from the book, except the opening here, the commentary. There we go. You're correct, George. The dribble ends when the dribbler palms carries the ball is allowed to come to rest in one or both hands and be able potentially to explain it. Next slide. And this here, anything more than a handshake, palm is vertical to the ground is considered palming. Great rule of thumb. And I think the last part is coaches must teach proper dribbling techniques. Officials must adjudicate the rules as written. So it's not your fault that he palmed or carried. Next slide. This one here, the slides will be posted, but here's what needs to happen, because I read through this and I know the difference, but I read through this, and to me, each individual has to go through and read and have an understanding. And it may be something that we talk about. I know we talked about it over the summer, but before the season, we may do another, maybe talk just specifically this and lay it out, because all this does is regurgitate what the book is and what the book says. If you get into the case book, there are some case plays that will help you as an individual official clarify it in your in your mind, but all of this is doing is regurgitating the book. But I think the point of this is it's telling across high school federation, across the nation, that folks need to get back into the books and know the differences and have an understanding of when they are applied. So Mark, I'll talk to you offline about potentially we put something together here around your schedule and maybe just concentrate on this a little bit more. Next slide.
Oh, hold on, Frank.
Go ahead.
So if we could just talk a little bit about, so with the flagrant fouls or in any of those flagrants or intentionals, you don't have to do it right away. So you can go to your partner and kind of see what they saw and get that input. But try not to do it on that initial play. We can always upgrade, but once we put it out there, there's no taking it back. So just be more patient and be more of a good communicator with your crew.
And you're right, Kenny. And I think the other thing is when you go through this slide deck, it'll talk about intentional fouls and it'll talk about late game situations. Have an understanding that an intentional foul could happen anytime throughout the game. Obviously, there's an intent towards the end of the game based upon score and such. But if someone just gets frustrated and grabs someone going up for a layup in the first 2 minutes of a ball game, if it was going to be an intentional at the end, it's an intentional at the beginning. So don't be afraid to call that foul as it is whenever it happens and be ready for it. And again, a little bit of a pregame. But Kenny's right. When you have that foul, the whistle blows. If you come together real quick and say, hey, what did you see? Because this is what I got and this is where I'm going with it. And somebody asked about an intentional foul. An example, I think in the slide deck here, there's a picture. So next one. So it talks about intentional foul. And then it talked about flagrant foul. You see the individual grab a shirt from behind, just trying to slow the, in this case, I would say the offensive player with the ball. And then number two, where you have a little bit more of an aggressive or excessive in nature that would be considered a possibly non-basketball play. So when you talk about that, the first number one, you may not come together. It looks pretty clear cut. But the second one refers back to what Kenny had talked about. This may be, you blow your whistle, you go to intentional foul. Thanks, Mark. You go to intentional foul, but then you come together real quick because someone in front, beside, or behind the play may have had a better. And what Mark just posted was on 30 August, we had a Zoom meeting, Zoom conference that talked about this extensively. And I think we had video too. So next slide.
And I think what he's saying, Frank, is that they can go find it on YouTube.
Correct. I'm sorry. Yes. Because I think we had probably about 4 or 6 plays that we went through. Thanks, Mark. Okay, this is right out of the book, an intentional foul. Intentional fouls include but are not limited to. Next slide.
Hey, Frank, can you explain just if there's an intentional foul, what is done? And if there's a flagrant foul, what the process is? Marker, like,
Are we talking about how the penalty?
Adjudicated.
how they're adjudicated?
Go ahead, Frank. Yeah.
Well, I thought it was in here.
Somebody was asking, so I thought if you could just voice it, that would be helpful.
I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I thought it was, they talk about it here in the slide deck. I don't have mine up. Go to the next, because here's that one. Oh, my bad. Go back to intentional foul, I'm sorry. So the question is the adjudication, is that what you're saying, Diane?
Yes, somebody asked, how do we properly adjudicate what happens when there is a intentional foul versus a flagrant foul?
Well, Soupy just answered, I thought, but on the intentional foul, and Soupy is correct, the intentional foul is, it's 2 balls or 2 shots by the offended player, and the ball is put back in play, spot closest to where the foul occurred, back to the team. Soupy's given all the answers right there, unless it's a missed 3-point.
Okay.
Soupy, go ahead.
And a flagrant foul?
Soupy, you got the flagrant foul?
Yeah, it would be helpful if it was typed for people.
What I'll do is I will put this all back together because I thought it was in there, and I will get chapter and verse so we can send it out in writing, because I thought the slide deck I saw this morning online had the intentional and the flagrant.
Well, it's in writing. It's in writing in our rule book.
No, I know it is. What I'm getting at is I thought it was in the slide deck.
Elaborate, Mark.
I'll get it on the slide deck.
Sure, both penalties are going to be 2 shots, right? So
Correct.
intentional foul is going to be at the spot of the foul, and a flagrant is like a technical, so we're going division line opposite table. That's going to be the difference on those. So flagrant is division line. We treat it like a technical. Intent. 2 shots on both. But yeah, we're talking if it's intentional on a 3-point shot and it's missed, then it's 3 shots. Right, Frank?
Then it's 3 shots. But also an intentional, or not the intentional, flagrant could result in an ejection.
Correct. And we're going on an ejection. We're going division line opposite table.
Correct.
Yeah. Spot. Yes. Point interruption. It's the spot of the foul. So it's not really POI on a intentional foul. It's where the foul occurred. So if we have an intentional foul in the backcourt, we're going to bring it down the nearest spot where it was. If we have an intentional foul at the rim, then we're going to put the ball on the end line. So yeah. Any questions on that? I'm looking in the chat. Yeah, so it's 2 shots on both of them, except for if it's a missed 3-point shot. Obviously, you're not going to give them 2. It's going to be 3 shots, and then depending where the foul occurred, they're going to get the ball back after those 3 shots. Again, I think that's all on that YouTube as well. I think we went over the rules. We went over the difference between intentional fouls and I think flagrant. I think we went over that. So yeah, a flagrant foul and 3-point shot. Correct, James. Anytime on a foul on the 3-point shot and it's unsuccessful, we're going to give him 3 shots. Why would you give him 2? That's obviously an advantage for the defense. So an unsuccessful 3-point shot, the difference is they get the ball back. Yep. Okay, so we get on that intentional foul spot, a flagrant, treated like a technical, we're going division line opposite table.
Thank you for clarifying. Any other questions regarding the rules, points of emphasis that were covered?
Hey, Diane, real quick. Somebody had it in there, asked, should we be calling more intentional fouls? I don't know. I'm not in your game, but if you're having that question, the point of emphasis here was clarification between the 2. And I think that the reason that they were, one, maybe intentional fouls aren't being called, but I think that the reason that the Federation put the points of emphasis was to make sure the 2 are being adjudicated properly. So to say that we need to call more, I wouldn't say that. But again, that's covered in your pregame. And I said it earlier that we have a tendency to call those at the end of a game, at the end of a close game, of something of that nature, because we're anticipating them maybe a little bit more. But that's not to say that intentional fouls don't happen at other times throughout the game.
You mind if I add something, Frank, to that?
Absolutely not. Add.
I agree with you, Frank. To answer that question, I don't know if they're looking for more intentional fouls. I think just understanding the actual definition of an intentional foul
Right.
would actually help us be more consistent on those. I've heard from a lot of coaches that we're not very consistent on the jersey grabs at the beginning of the game, but then we come out with intentional foul at the end of the game. So I think it's just the lack of enforcement, and that probably due, my personal opinion, doing a lot of things over the summer off season, and also being in a bunch of other Zoom meetings across the country. I think it just comes down to understanding definitions. I think if we can truly understand definitions, we've talked about it, it actually can really help you with your judgment. So that's where I'm at on that.
Thanks, Mark.
All right. Anything else, Frank?
No, I think I got out to my slide deck.
Here's a question for you if you want to read that.
Let me get back at the chat.
Daniel's question, did you get that?
On who is allowed to take those free throws, those players previous, if they are. So I think what he's getting at, Daniel, is after it's after any quarter or the fourth quarter, who is allowed to take the free throws. If it is free throws that extends the fourth quarter, and I think we talked about this over the summer also, if it's the technical fouls free throw at the end of the fourth quarter, who is allowed to take these free throws? The quarter has not ended in this respect if you have to play the free throws out, i.e., so the coach is allowed to substitute if he has a substitute he is allowed to substitute, and any legal player in the game at the time can take those free throws.
Yes, I think you answered it, Frank. That's what he's asking. Who can shoot him?
Yeah, who can shoot him? If it doesn't have to be the five that ended.
Yeah, or the substitute.
If he makes a substitute because the quarter is in this case the fourth quarter or overtime, it's still an extension of. If he makes a substitute, any legal player that's in at that time, so he can make a substitute.
Yeah, it's no different than a technical foul at any other time.
Right.
It can be a substitute. It can be the play, and they can shoot one, and another guy can come in.
And then he can flip it and shoot the other one. One shoot one, second one's shot by somebody else. Well, I guess that's
right. Any other questions for Frank?
And last thing I say, if you call me, correct, nobody that's been disqualified. Thanks, Jared. If you call me during the season, most of the time I will answer. I don't have 400 names loaded into my phone. But if you call me and I don't pick up because I didn't recognize the number or something, please leave a message. I will get back to you one way or another. So please leave me a message, because I don't always answer a number I don't recognize just because it's at season right now. But leave a message and I will get back with you. Don't let us leave you hanging. Leave a message, send me an email, something, and I'll get back to you one way or another. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Appreciate it. Good information. Mark, thank you. Kenny, thank you. Appreciate you guys. Yes, Mark, you said you wanted to talk about something real quick. Go ahead.
With the website with the library plays, is that good to speak on, or?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I'll keep it short so we can get out of here. I've been in the works with obviously with DVR, who we've done a lot with over the last few months, they're creating a website for us where it's going to be a library of plays. So they're all going to be from our games. They're all going to be private. So only, sorry about the noise in the background. They're all going to be private for only SABOA members. So it's not out there. You get a login, those type things. And it's going to be a long list of plays that you can download to your phone. You can go onto the website and search it. They're all going to be categorized by block charge, by travel, by atypical situations, bench decorum, you name it. We came up with a list of probably 60 different categories. Really user friendly. I was able to look at where the website is right now. It's looking pretty cool. And we're going to have that free for this upcoming season. So I'll get you more information on it, but this is going to be really good growth for everybody to see plays. We can talk plays all day long, but a lot of us are visual learners. You want to know what a block charge play is. You want to know what travel looks like, a perimeter travel, a post travel, whatever. And if you have any other plays that you want to send to me, I can upload them. We're going to have crew chief, a category for crew chiefs, where crew chiefs can pull up plays and show clips in their pregame. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It's something that is going to be really beneficial for us. I'm excited about it. It's in the works, but I did get the clearance yesterday. It is going to be ready prior to November. So in the next week or two, it's going to be up, rolling, ready to go. All you have to do is when you go in there is just log in, create an account. I think it's just your name and an email, and that is it. And then you log in and you're good to go. So I'm going to work with it, tweak it. What I'll probably do is do a quick tutorial on my end, which I can throw up on our YouTube, and you guys can look at that. And I do apologize for the games up here, the factory in the background, they're still going. So that's in the works. I'll get more information to Diana. She can put it out, but I just wanted to add that to you guys for us to use this season.
Mark, they asked about if DDRs can still do evaluations this year.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Everything's on plan now. It probably won't be what we were talking about as how many they can do. But yes, as many games as we have and as many games as I can get to them, they're still going to be doing exactly where we're on target like we were at any other season.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Okay. We're going to go ahead and move on to the Constitution and bylaws. So we're doing it a little bit different this year. Per our Constitution, we are allowed to do an electronic vote. And so what we are doing is we are sending out a link for you to vote. Those are going out literally right now to everybody. If you are a member in good standing, you will be receiving a link to vote. Those all literally just went out. So you should be getting them in your email box. And what I ask is that you go and you vote by 11:59 p.m. today. And then those votes are going to be confirmed that they are all members, done by members in good standing by Jean. And then we'll have the results out no later than Tuesday, 6 p.m. So please make sure you go vote. It's very important. We've had several meetings where you can ask questions about the Constitution and bylaws. So hopefully we covered everything. Also, in that voting link, in the email, you should actually have a copy of what your new and proposed Constitution and bylaws will be. So there's no question. You know exactly what you're voting on. I've already seen some people have received the email, so that's great. We currently, in good standing, have 221 members in good standing, Martha. Thank you. So that is what we're going to cover there. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Open forum right now. No questions, no comments. Okay, I can't emphasize enough how important it is for you to go vote. Number one. Number two, we'll get you all those kind of that information regarding all the schools, what schools are doing dressing rooms, some that are not, all those kinds of stuff. So just keep an eye out for that. And then
Art has a question, I believe. He has
I'm
his
sorry?
hand raised. Art has his hand raised.
Okay, Art. I didn't see that. You want to type in your question, Art? Yes, Felipe, caldo is definitely on the menu for tonight. I appreciate y'all handling my crappy sounding voice. I'm sure it's painful. Art, do you have a question? I'll call you. I'll email you and I can talk. All right, next meeting will be November. Jared, I don't drink. Next meeting will be November 15th. So we'll send out an email then. So everybody again, important, your blocks, go get those taken care of. Respond to those scrimmage requests, everything coming up. And let's, wish everybody the best season.
Hey,
And
Diana.
yes,
If they paid their dues today, they were probably not on that list and have not received the email. Is that correct? Did we
Nope,
have
I got updated as of 4 p.m. today.
Okay, so if you paid your dues while you were on this call, who should they reach out to?
Gene,
Okay, there you go. If you paid the dues while you were on the call, reach out to Gene. He'll confirm it, and then he should be able to send you that link to vote.
yes, and one last thing, Gene had something he needed to say real quick about dues. Go ahead, Gene. Gene?
Okay, real quick, since this meeting has started, I've received over 20 emails about people asking me if they're valid on their dues. You can check yourself. Go to Arbiter and go to the central hub for SABOA or THSBOA, and it has exact in there when you paid, if you paid your dues. You don't need to call me, or you don't need to call Marvin or call your division rep. You can check yourself on Arbiter.
Great, thank you, Gene. If you have, even if you're a new official, if you have paid your local and state dues, you were on that email list. If you have not paid one of them, you were not on that email list. So make sure if you want to verify, Gene's email's on there. Thank you, Becca. Gene's email's on here. Email him and he can let you know. I want to thank you guys. We had over 200 participants, so this is great. Thank y'all for being here. Everybody have a wonderful season. Please call me, email me if you have any questions or concerns. And I wish you all the best of luck this season. And hopefully we'll get to see each other soon. Everybody take care and have a great rest of your Sunday night.